Hello and welcome to another edition of Positive Leadership, the podcast that helps you grow as an individual, a leader, and ultimately as a global citizen. Servant leadership is an essential element of effective leadership. By putting the needs of others first and prioritizing collaboration and community building, leaders can help to create a more just, equitable, and sustainable future for all. My guest today, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, truly embodies the characteristics of a servant leader: humility, empathy, and a willingness and commitment to listen and learn from others. As United Nations Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women, she's been a global advocate for women and girls, spearheading initiatives to promote women's political participation, economic empowerment, and access to healthcare and education. She was also the first woman to hold the position of Deputy President, the highest-ranking female political leader in the history of South Africa. She's also now the Chancellor, University of Johannesburg. Phumzile, a very warm welcome. Thank you so much for spending the time with me today.
Thank you very much. It's good to see you.
Good to see you again. Phumzile, I was very interested to read a little about your parents, who I believe had a huge influence on you and who instilled in you a servant leadership. You are also heavily influenced and inspired by the women who run your local Young Women's Christian Association. I believe that you regularly attended. So can you tell us more about those early years and where your incredible dedication to leading and serving others come from?
Well, my mother in particular was a nurse, but also a community worker. She was a nurse in the community where she also played the role of community leader. She taught literacy in our dining room, and we used to have to support her in that work. She was active in our church and was engaged with young mothers on family planning in particular. Now, as we know, reproductive rights are such a key issue for women. So it felt to me in those early days that taking part in what is happening in your community is just a way of life. I think I only realized when I was much older that these are things you choose to do or not to do. I grew up knowing that this is just an extension of my life.
Well, it's kind of a calling, if I hear you well, right? I mean, seeing your mom as a role model, as you said, both at home but also in a community, I'm sure has given you and your siblings a lot to think about early on.
Yes, indeed. Also, I guess my father was a teacher, and a lot of times at home, it was school meetings of parents coming, in many cases, to tell him that they didn't have money to pay the school fees.
Wow.
And so it was constant managing of all those issues. You'd have thought that our home was an office or an NGO.
No, I understand why after. We'll come back to that later. You've been obviously interested in joining NGOs and setting up your own foundation. So very involved at the core of your family already, in the roots of your community, with a teacher, nurses, I mean, really taking care of others.
Yeah.
So a few years after Phumzile, 1976, which was, I think, the first year of university for you, was also a very special year in South Africa for the student uprising in South Africa. There was a lot of brutality, lots of students lost their lives. You are part of the generation who devoted themselves to fighting for the country, to end apartheid, and to address all manner of human rights. So in your life, and I know you had many events going on through your life, how significant was that lived experience of the student uprising in driving you forward to seek for a change?
Yes, 1976 was a very big year in South Africa, and for students in particular, because whether you were at high school or at university, all of us were affected with both schools closing as well as all universities in South Africa closing. And that was the time when we had to sit as young people to consider what will our role be in the struggle and what is needed from us. And looking back now, maybe in not a clever way, we decided liberation first, education last, which was not quite the thing that our parents would have chosen for us. But it felt like it is not possible to spend so much time at school and not carry on with the project for liberation. But of course, the call at that time for the ANC was that they do not want a country in which there is no education. So we have to figure out how to do both.
Do both. But you made it clear with your friends at the time that liberation had to come first as the first fight, and then you could build
and that was a
popular
popular
education.
Slogan.
Yes, okay.
It was even a popular slogan,
Okay.
you know. And of course, quite a number of the students of my time dropped out of school at that time. They left the country, went into exile to dedicate themselves to the struggle. I also left the country, but I went to study in Lesotho. But that gave me more time to be in close contact with many of my colleagues who were in exile, who we needed to confer with and plan with. So I sort of was the lucky one who managed to do both.
And so, should we say, Phumzile, that at that time, really, for you, there was no turning back, right? I mean,
absolutely. Yeah. That's I was very clear about that. I can never do anything that takes me away from the struggle. If I was to be in education where there was no possibility to confront apartheid, I probably would have wanted to focus on apartheid. I mean, in a sort of a funny way. I had a boyfriend who jilted me because she said, I am tired of this struggle of yours. There's nothing to talk about with you. That is all we talk about. I'm sorry.
This is the only obsession you have.
That was my first time to face rejection.
Okay, so you change your boyfriend, I guess, right?
No, I didn't change him. He walked away from me.
Okay, he made his choice, and you made obviously yours, and it was a big turning point in your life, and did it very, very well. You know, I know you've been really fighting for a number of years, and then you also started your career in news development and education, right? Following South Africa's first democratic election in 1984, you also became a member of parliament, chairing the Public Service Portfolio Committee. In some ways, it must have been a very exciting time, but yet there was so much to be done, right? So what skills did you have to develop in that moment as a leader? And what did good leadership look like as you helped navigate South Africa through this incredible period of change?
Yeah, well, to be engaged in any organization, including political organization, is one of the best platforms on which you can acquire leadership skills. And in the struggle where your focus is change, that also prepares you for leadership in the community, in society. So I can say the things that I learned in the struggle, how to negotiate and relate to the people I was with.
Yes.
How to handle disagreement, because we were fighting for the same things. So even if you disagreed, you needed to find a consensus of some sort so that you can all move together, recognizing that the work that you do must not necessarily give you benefits. It is delivering on the objectives you are about that is much more important. Also, that teaches you to have just all your energy thrown into whatever you are trying to achieve. So a lot of the leadership skills that one needed, you pick them up in the process of doing things. But also you learn from people that you are with, isn't it? You make mistakes, people tolerate you and teach you.
Yes.
That is the best teacher. You fall, you rise.
Yes.
That is the best lesson. And you then also develop the need to do the same to others, the ones coming after you. As you are bringing the next generation, so to say, that sharpens your own leadership, because you are able to think about where you are going and who you are bringing with you.
Well, that sounds like a wonderful accelerated leadership kind of learning in flight, right? As you did all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, would you mind sharing with us maybe a moment of coaching you got from someone supporting you, as you may have made a mistake because obviously you are young, you are driven with a purpose, and you learn that, hey, maybe Phumzile, you need to do something a bit differently now moving forward. Do you recall any of such advice? Yeah.
I somebody that stands up for me is a lady called Brigelia Bam. And in particular, I met her when I was working for the YWCA.
Okay.
And in Geneva, by the way.
In Geneva, okay.
Yeah. And she was working at the World Council of Churches at the time. Okay. And it's a very male-dominated environment, as you know. In those times, it was even worse. But she held her own very well there, and was very impressive to me. But the one thing that I learned from her was how important it is to be humble.
Humility.
Absolutely. And not to take yourself so serious that you can't even laugh at yourself.
I love that.
So for her, every step that you took, no matter how much in public or in a place of importance you were, you always have to put the people in front of you above you.
Wonderful.
And that has been a really good lesson for me, because, as you know, in politics, you serve people. In the end, those are your bosses. And so when people fuss around you, treating you like an important person, it's important to always remember this show is not about me.
No, it's about the people you serve.
And try to bring that fact up there so that you are sort of not so much, you are in front, but you are leading from behind, if you know what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Love that moment of reflection, a way it gave you some incredible strengths in terms of leadership, Phumzile. Another moment, I guess, of deep reflection and coaching was in 2005, when you became the first woman to hold the position of Deputy President of South Africa. I understand that Nelson Mandela himself gave you some personal advice when he offered you the job, right? So can you share with us, between friends, on this episode, the conversation you had with Nelson Mandela? What did he tell you?
Well, actually, by that time when I became deputy president, Nelson Mandela was already retired. But he appointed me firstly to be a deputy minister.
Okay, to start with.
And of course, I had not worked in the area of trade and so on.
Yes.
So I was a bit nervous. And he just told me that, I have been a prisoner for a long time. So no one trained me on how to be a president. But I was determined to learn and to do it. So go and be a deputy minister of trade and industry. You will learn. We are all here. We will support you. The rest was history.
Wow, that's a wonderful, wonderful moment of deep confidence, of course, shown by your leadership and the way you've been reflecting on it. Sometimes just one person saying, "I've got your back," exactly what you said, you can do this.
Absolutely.
Can make all the difference, right, in helping someone feel confident, to give them the boost they need to succeed. So because the fact is, there's lots of people who feel unsupported in their lives. Phumzile, talking about people you support, I know you've been taking mentoring very seriously. Who have been your most important mentors? You mentioned already one example before, right? And what have you got out of them? And because I think mentorship is a two-way street, right? What have you got out of your mentees as well? So if you could share both sides of the coin in terms of you as a mentor and from a mentee perspective as well.
Actually, I find that when you are mentoring, you absolutely get more out of it. Yes. Especially if your mentee is younger than you, because there's certain freshness.
Yes.
Of perspectives that you get there. It's important that in that relationship you are able to provide your insights that you have gained because of the experience of having lived longer, as well as showing them what they are likely to come up against as they go back, and always going back to paraphrase to them and say, this is why I did this and this and this, then this is where it is taking me. So remember, when you ever find yourself in this situation, it would lead you to this. I always find that taking time to do that is always important. And then sometimes what you have taken for granted is the results you are expecting is rejected or questioned. And that also opens up a new world for you that you have never thought of, new possibilities.
Yes.
And that's the freshness that comes with the innocent inquiry.
Yes.
That kind of like says, I hear what you're saying, but I think you could also do it this way.
Yes.
So that engagement, I find, is always important. But also, I think it's always important as you are mentoring to be reminding yourself and your mentor that wherever you climb, make sure you're not climbing alone. Always lift as you climb.
Yes.
Because it's very lonely at the top.
Oh, yes. It gets more and more lonely.
Yes. Do it so that you are not lonely.
Yes.
If anything else, always make sure that you never put yourself in the situation of being the only one. The only one, you get into this, I am the only woman who has done this. I'm the only that is absolutely denying society, the talent that is out there.
Talents that surround you, that make you to climb that mountain, right? There's always people supporting you in that ascension. Yes.
Yeah, because for people of my generation, I don't think that there has been any step that you have taken that is significant without the help of somebody.
Yes.
Without other people opening the way. They may not have succeeded. They might have gone before you, preparing the ground.
Yes.
And never benefiting from preparing the ground. And you are the one who gets there, and you are able to get the full benefit of the work they've always done. So it's always important to always remember that you are where you are because somebody else got there first and made it possible that future generations will take it to the next level.
No, I think wonderful confirmation of humility as a core value and growing on the shoulders of others, giants, not you, but others, who made it possible for you. I'm with you, Phumzile. Now, I'd like to change direction and talk to you about the importance of upskilling and digital literacy in particular. In a previous podcast, I spoke with Reshma Sojani, who suffers under disproportionate numbers of women to men in computer programming class in the US. She then went onto designing and running out an initiative called Girls Who Code. You may have heard about this initiative, I guess.
Yes.
Designed to increase by millions the number of women who can actually code in the world. And here at Microsoft, in my company, we believe everyone deserves access to the skills, knowledge, opportunity to achieve more, including translating those skills into meaningful jobs. So since leaving office, I know you've set up a foundation, the Mlambo Foundation, right? Which is dedicated to digital literacy, training for educators. You are focusing on schools improvement, you told me the other day, and teachers skilling and building capacity as well, including behavioral training such as positive masculinity, you told me the other day as well. So can you tell me more about why you decided to set up that foundation in the first place? And what kind of impact are you the most proud of that foundation in South Africa these days?
Yeah. Yes, my foundation works in schools to improve the quality of learning and teaching. And we believe that the use of technology in education is crucial in order to expand the access to knowledge that teachers may need for themselves, that learners also need for themselves, so that people are not only dependent on the lessons they get in class with a teacher in front of them. On their own, they can also be knowledge seekers and knowledge creators, and they can collaborate with other people in their schools and people who are far away from them. And of course, you probably know much better than I do as Microsoft that the future will be and is already for those who know how to use technology effectively. And for me, it was important to close this gap in our schooling system and making sure that the gender digital divide in the schools is also closed, making sure that when we manage to get gadgets, you make sure that the girls get them first.
Yes.
Because at home, if they buy a phone, the first one to get it will be a boy.
Could be a boy,
So you have to make sure that at school you are addressing that to girls. And also, I wanted to push as many teachers as possible to be competent users of technology, because they are role models to the learners. When the girls see that their female teacher is doing this so well, that already is a good lesson. And I am very excited to see that in the schools we work with, the female teachers are just leading.
Wow. Okay.
They are really, really doing well. That is encouraging. But also, we teach the children to take the skills they pick up at school home, especially to their moms.
So they can
So
educate
they must
their
go
moms.
at home and say to mom, this is how don't just use the phone for talking. You can
Yes.
also do this. You can also do this. And in the majority, women use their phones to check medical information.
Yeah.
So a mobile phone is a very good source for health advices. They also use it for commercial possibilities, looking for where they can buy things cheap in particular, and those that are entrepreneurs who will understand the use of a phone or a computer much better, also then know how to use it for marketing. And now with social media, they obviously can do much more, as well as financial literacy.
Of course.
Because for many parents also, the receipt and exchange of money on the phones is now a way of life. So it's important that your grandmother, your aunt knows how to receive this money, knows how to send you money. Where possible. So it's a very dynamic learning space. To try and impart all those skills to the teachers, to the children, to the parents.
Yeah, no, I love the way you talk about it, Phumzile, and the way you do it through your foundation in terms of creating a virtuous circle, right? I mean, all the way from the teachers to the kids, to the parents, to the community. I mean, empowering them using technology to do more, to achieve more in their lives. And, both as a company, Microsoft, and, I'd also the opportunity to have many guests, including Sal Khan. I'm sure you know the Khan Academy.
Yes.
And when we see the way we can enable such organizations like yours and others using the power of new generative AI. I mean, everybody's talking about ChatGPT these days, of course. And the way it can help the kids to have a self-paced learning, customized to their needs, to be more curious. But also the way it helps teachers to develop critical thinking, collaborative skills as well, to work with others, to think through issues and develop a sense of deeper reflection for people. That I think is creating a huge value in the community. So wonderful to see the impact you have in education. Let's shift gears now and talk again, but even more deeply about women's rights. I mean, women's rights are human rights proclaimed then First Lady Hillary Clinton in September 1995 at the United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing. And his groundbreaking speech marked a turning point for feminism in an international effort toward gender equality, articulating women's rights as a basic fundamental concept of civil rights. During this conference, 189 countries unanimously adopted the Beijing Declaration and a platform for action for women's equality. In 2013, you, Phumzile, became United Nations Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women. You played a leading role in the development of the Sustainable Development Goals adopted by the UN 2 years later in 2015, which include a very specific chapter and goal on gender equality. Now, reaching that goal today and now is really a question of implementation and scaling. But it has proven to be very hard, especially through the pandemic and beyond the pandemic now, actually. So let me ask you the following question, given, of course, the incredible fight you took on and the leadership you developed in that area. What is your perspective on how we could push ourselves harder to really drive that gender equity and global diversity in the world so that we can accelerate our progress towards achieving the different sustainable development goals? Because I think if you don't get that gender equity as an anchor, as a base for many of the other challenges, well, we miss the opportunity to empower a lot more people to achieve those incredible goals. So what would you urge all of us to do differently?
Yeah. Well, definitely the pandemic has been a big setback in so many ways. Just today here in South Africa, we're just announcing the reading levels of children from grade R to grade 4, gauging what happened during the pandemic when schools were closed.
Yeah.
And we found that many schools and parts of the country, children reeled back, and we lost years and years of what we've put in to teach children to read. And of course, in gender equality, it has been quite a loss. It is quite sad to realize that the rights that we fight for, and in some cases we win, are actually rights that we can also lose even after gaining them. But now my perspective, and I feel very strongly about that, is that I am not focusing on women now. I'm focusing on men.
Men. To change men's behavior.
Because after all, gender equality is a man's issue because they started the nonsense. So you have to get the men to be engaged in an effective way, and to provide the possibility for women to reach the greater heights. Otherwise, if you think about gender-based violence, if men were to stop beating up women, the problem is solved. Men lead institutions, countries, and companies, and they choose other men to lead with them and do a bad job together. If men were to bring women and mix and not just include the people who look like them, we could have something that will work for everyone. But you need to convince the men. The men must embrace the notion of equality, much better, and then take the next step. If you think about child marriage, it's men who marry children. It is only girls who find themselves in relationships they don't want, that are forced into them. If men, fathers, brothers can decide that nothing of this sort will happen to my child, and I, as a man, I would also never do this to a child of someone else. That changes the game. So there's so much work that we have to do on men. I think feminists of my generation, I think we missed it by having neglected to engage men for such a long time. And now we really have to focus on men.
Oh, it's wonderful. And you and I had a discussion previously to this podcast, Phumzile, where you told me about this curriculum I think you've developed in your university, right, for positive masculinity. Would you mind elaborating what it is? Because I think you're trying to address at the core of the issue with boys, actually.
Yes. Positive masculinity for boys and men is really engaging men about the need for them to be proud of their masculinity, but not to make it imposing to anyone. To look at their masculinity as an equal set of values that they could have towards women or people of any other gender. It's important, you have boys, young men thinking that multiple relationships make you look like, a real guy. No, this is not wrong. It's wrong for you. It's wrong to the other people you are doing this to. Men in married situations never doing anything at home to help to run a home because they think that it is masculine to just sit and eat and do nothing. You see in rural areas, young girls fetching water, little girls carrying big buckets of water, and muscular men sitting at home watching these little girls doing all of this. Positive masculinity is going to the river yourself and making sure that you do not give that as a task to your child who needs to play because the child is still growing. Positive masculinity is getting at home and washing the dishes, and not expecting that somebody else. It's a given job for somebody else. It's never a job for me. So it's finding ways to bring all of those things at home that we actually need to be working together.
Well, that's a big agenda, and I'm sure that with all the work you're doing with your foundation, there's a lot to expect from that work and learning to be applied more broadly as well across South Africa. And actually, honestly, all of our countries actually. It goes far beyond South Africa. So great that you have this leadership in that area, Phumzile. It's been said many times about you that your purpose and passion for your work is grounded in your personal experiences. And we discussed some of those experiences together already. And I spoke recently with Harvard professor Ranji Gulati, who has been authoring a book called Deep Purpose. And he was on my podcast recently. And he talked about the difficulties in embedding deep purpose for all employees working in large organizations. That could be actually a government organization, that could be an NGO, that could be a business as well. How the message can get lost and purpose decays exponentially as you go down the hierarchy, right, from the top to the very first line. So from your own experience, what advice can you give to our listeners about how you go about aligning people's desires with the purpose of the organization that they belong to, that they work for and support? What has been your own approach from the leadership standpoint to get people working with you at the UN, in your foundation, in the government, to really be aligned with a single purpose?
Yeah. Most people are good people. They want to do the right thing.
Yes.
They want their work to matter, to bring about changes.
Yeah.
I think that if you are in a leadership or in service, it is always important to create an environment where everyone can feel that they are serving that purpose and give them the tools to make them get on with that, because you get much more in the job if your employees see that they are serving a purpose and that is appreciated. It helps them to propel. Also, throw them at the deep end so that they can learn new skills. They can swim up and come up with new ideas and feel a sense of achievement and conquering something which they will be doing, so that every year when they look at what have I done this year, oh my goodness, look at how many people we have given water to. Look at how many children we have enabled to stay at schools. So the macro purpose and the micro purpose, those are important. Give people a possibility to do it in chunks, but also to see the bigger picture. But most important for me, it's also to teach people to have the responsibility to be self-propelling, so that you are not looking over them every time. It is obviously very distressing when you have to be checking all the time. The best work environment is when you know that when we've said, this is what we're going to do, these are the tools, this is the path for you, and then you just support people in the background to make sure that they realize their purpose.
No, I love it. It's really at the core fundamentals of positive leadership. It's really about empowering people to achieve more and letting them know that we're going to grow. So now, Phumzile, I'd like to ask you about what it means to be a leader in terms of great uncertainty. Recently you are part of the African Union's mediation team, which facilitated a peace agreement between the Ethiopian government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front. The war, which had been going on for 2 years by then, had killed thousands of people and left, I think, an estimated 9 million people in humanitarian disaster. There was no guarantee that a deal would be signed, and the stakes were incredibly high. So what kind of leadership was required to make that peace deal a reality? And what lessons can you share from that experience?
Well, I think my big takeaway from this experience is firstly, listen.
Listen. Mm.
Just listen, because everybody wants to feel that their story was understood.
Yeah.
Both sides had stories, and in some cases they both tell the same story, but in such different way.
Yes.
But listen and make sure that nobody feels that their story is not valid.
Yeah.
So respecting that. The second thing is convincing people about the losses that they will accumulate as a result of being in a war, constantly bringing the examples of what they stand to lose as well as what they stand to gain. But making sure that you show them where are the steps, what steps they can take in order to go in the right direction, and to be tough with them.
Be tough. Okay.
Because obviously people will engage in a way that maybe will enable them to win.
Yeah.
And it might not create something that is acceptable to the other group.
Yes.
So always bring the issue of coming to a settlement that is a win-win,
for
that
both parties.
Benefits both sides, and be really tough about those issues. Ultimately, it is obviously their own country.
Yeah.
So there's a way in which you cannot force them on everything. What I noticed in the case of Ethiopia was that for the Tigrayans, the death and destruction in their community was too much.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that was what was driving them. They just wanted bloodshed to be over. Yeah. On the part of the government of Ethiopia, the economic losses they were suffering as a result had reached a point where it was impossible. And of course, we were coming out of COVID and so on. So the more they were getting isolated, was the more everything that they were trying to do to rebuild the country was just not going anywhere. So it's also important that both sides know and feel that the losses are just too much for them.
Love your insights, Phumzile, talking about listening deeply the stories of both sides of the table, getting them to understand the perspective on losses and how much they've lost and they can lose until there's a win-win, actually. And really, at the end of the day, really bringing some toughness as well in the process to make sure that they understand that the mediator can be tough as well to get to where the situation needs to go to. So wonderful, again, leadership lesson. Now, I'd like, last couple of final questions. I'd like to move to education, which I think is a passion. I know it's a passion of yours. We already discussed some of that. And it's a shared passion, as you know, I have as well. Early on in your childhood, I think you wanted to become a teacher, actually. And, of course, now you're the Chancellor of the University of Joburg. And in such a position, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on how to transform higher education. Happen to be, I share that with you as well, the chairman of a global business school called Schema that certifies 10,000 students across campuses in 5 continents, including a campus in Stellenbosch in South Africa, actually.
Yes, I was so surprised to learn about that. I went to Google it.
Okay, you find it.
Yes.
And 6 months ago, we launched a first ever massive global online AI-enabled consultation called Youth Talks. And Youth Talks represent open-ended questions to 15, 29 years old kids across the world. And we got today more than 600,000 contributions, comments from 197 countries. I wanted to share with you some early insights we had to get you to reflect on that. Again, we have not fully disclosed that, but in a kind of a early themes. What did they tell us across the world? They tell us, first, we want to make a difference in the world. We want more humanity. We want to address climate change. The climate challenge, of course. We want to be in a position to change for the better, and we need to make higher education accessible to many more of us, many more who don't have access. So, as you hear those comments, and I'm sure many more you have from South Africa as well and across Africa, how would you redesign if you had, basically a blank sheet of paper, you were to redesign the higher education system in response to the world youth, again, talks and comments, and in perspective as well, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that you know so well because you are part of that, what would you do? How would it look like in your university and higher ed system everywhere in the world? What would you do?
Well, certainly this is the time to reimagine education and reimagine the future. And if I were to redesign education, firstly would be about ensuring access and making it as accessible as possible to all the children, with a particular focus on the children who are poor, because this is the one thing that can get them out of poverty.
Yes.
And with the technology we have now, you can facilitate learning for anybody, anywhere, anytime.
Exactly.
So I would be wanting to provide a parallel, accessible learning mechanisms that makes education accessible, higher education accessible to anyone who needs it.
Yes.
Secondly, I think I would have a generic course at first year that all the students must do, which has something to do with emotional intelligence, humanity, and all the things that we build society in. I think what in South Africa we call Ubuntu.
Ubuntu, yes.
I would have that as a generic course so that it doesn't matter what you have come to do. If you have been able to work hard to qualify to be at a higher education institution, you have to have Ubuntu.
I love that. Ubuntu,
because that's always a minority of the people in any country who make it to higher education. So you have to be very graceful to the rest of society because you are this lucky one.
Love those two fundamental principles, Phumzile. Love them a lot, actually, and I'm sure we'll get back to you in the future to talk more about what we can do together. No, let me get to almost a close. You are someone, and I can feel it during those discussions we had together, with a very strong positive attitude. We can feel it. I can even feel the vibes all the way from Joburg to Paris. And I think to me, it's part of positive leadership. It's essential for any success you want to have with others in whatever you do in your life. So is that positive attitude or positive leadership something that has come to you easily or something that you had to develop? And if so, how do you cultivate, or do you nurture and maintain such a positive mindset day after day, and particularly at times where you have to really tackle some very tough, sometimes tragic issues that we discussed during this podcast? How do you do that?
I have to say, the lady that I spoke to, Brigelia Bam, was one person who was very positive. In an infectious way.
Yes.
I learned a lot about staying positive because being negative and dwelling on the things that you cannot do waste the energy you need to do the things you can do.
Yes.
So preserve all your energy and your attitude so that which you can do well. just having the capacity to accept your failures.
Yes.
And do that gracefully. Sad as it may be.
Yes.
Disappointing as it may be, but accept it and focus on what you can do. And
Absolutely.
That is what propels me not to dwell too much of what I couldn't do and be the best at what I can do.
Focus on what you can control.
Yeah.
And bring your very best to what you can actually control. Your very best.
Absolutely.
Now, unfortunately, this is going to be the last question. Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, it's been wonderful. You've been personally involved with some of the most exciting yet traumatic events in your life, from the apartheid we discussed together to the UN Gender Equity Act, some wars in Africa as well. Out of all those critical moments in your life, what kind of wisdom, what kind of philosophy of your personal life have you shaped to continue to be passionate about driving a positive change in the world? In a few words, what is your personal philosophy, Phumzile?
Well, just realizing that I am lucky with what I have. I am lucky I have some education. I am lucky I am not disabled. I can do many things with my hands, with my mind. So I am here, therefore, in this world for a reason. And I have to make sure that I fulfill my purpose of being here. Because after all, I am just renting my space right now on earth in order to prepare it for the future generations. So I have to pay my dues, and my dues is doing the best for the people that are around me now.
Wow.
And it's just not an option to abdicate and take myself out of the space of activity, because I am here. I can still, God has given me relatively good health. So all of those things are there in order for me to use to make the world a better place.
Well, I cannot imagine any better conclusion, Phumzile, of our dialogue. It's been so wonderful to spend time with you, to get and share your own moments of wisdom with our listeners. I really wish you the very best in all the capacities you have. And so thank you so much for your time today, Phumzile.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.